this morning to review the papers is The Spectator. Diary editor James Hill and the journalist Afua Hagen. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss the papers. Let's start with The Observer. This is quite their front page spread, James, and it's all about Sir Keir Starmer, I suppose, lacking clear purpose.
Yes, these are comments in a new book by one of Labour's main thinkers, John Cruddas, someone who's done all sorts of jobs for successive leaders over the years. And really it comes at a time when I think a lot of Labour MPs are saying, OK, well, Keir Starmer's got us where he needs to be, ahead in the polls by 20 points. What does he actually stand for? And it's one thing being able to promise all sorts of things in opposition, but I think some are a bit concerned that what's he going to be like in government when it's sort of 2 years in, you've got hard choices, the governors to choose, and if you've got sure what your key principles are, how are you going to be able to make the decisions in terms of keeping the country safe in terms of trade-offs?
And that's a worry, really, isn't it, for voters and those undecided voters of whether he'll be able to scoop them up in that general election, Afua.
Definitely. And, you know, Keir Starmer, like you said, 20 points ahead in the polls at the moment. But he's done that by kind of pivoting away from those real Labour values that people who traditionally vote Labour would vote for him for. And I suppose there's got to be an element of doing that to get into office. But once you're in office, who is Keir Starmer going to be? Who is he going to be for? And it's about those people in the middle, those undecided voters have got to be able to trust him, got to be able to trust him to deliver on the promises that he's going to make in this time getting up to election and make the changes that people really, really want to see. And that's a difficult balancing act for him at the moment.
Yeah, he said he wants to bring back the dignity in politics, the professionalism. Is he the man to do that? Rishi Sunak certainly had a challenge on his hands, didn't he?
Well, I think that after sort of 13 years of government, the opposition inherently gets sort of switched to them as people sort of say, well, we want time for a change, etc. I think that's the mood that's growing in the country, so I think he'll benefit from that. But I think the key thing, of course, is that, you know, Keir Starmer, although he's had a big job, Director of Public Prosecutions, hasn't been...
Very successful career.
But hasn't been in government himself as a minister, and that rarely happens. And I think that one of the things is the last time that really happened from Labour was when Tony Blair went in 1997, and he admitted 10 years later how much he didn't know. So I think the key thing is Labour have done very well out of opposition the last few years, but the key thing is to step up now, make that transition to government, and also keep that election coalition together. And I think that what Cruddas' comments today highlight is how there's a lot of tension a bit below the surface. Everyone's very happy when it's all going well, but let's just see if the poll lead starts to drop, etc. The Tories will try to exploit that. Will some of the divides in the Labour coalition come out?
And we remember, don't we, when Gordon Brown left office, there was no more money left in the pot, you know? So it's whichever way you look at it, it's not going to be an easy job. There'll be lots of debt, there'll be lots of problems in the country. Shall we move on to the Sunday Telegraph?
Yeah.
Talk to me about plans to kind of expose Labour for their debt and what we've been discussing just now.
Yeah, you talk there that there is going to be a lot of debt. And in the lead up to the election, the Conservatives are planning to use a budget. So there's been a budget announced, so there's going to be a budget on March the 6th. Lots of discussions about what will be in that. What's the purpose of doing that? And one of the purposes of doing that is Rishi Sunak taking the fight to the Labour Party and basically exposing them or exposing any weaknesses they may have over their fiscal policy. So this is really about bringing in a new rule about debt management and basically saying that so the government has a rule in place that debt must be on course to fall as a share of national income in 5 years' time. But some figures in the government are saying that that is actually too easy to achieve. So they want to bring in harder fiscal rules that the Labour Party and the Labour Party in government won't be able to step up to. So it's kind of like Rishi Sunak eking out Keir Starmer, trying to expose the Labour Party over what they potentially will do wrong over debt and the fiscal policy if they get to government.
Well, the government, James, trying to frame Labour as the party of borrowing, of debt,
completely.
Essentially.
Yes.
This is the article.
Yes, completely. They're looking at this 28 billion and the Green New Deal as a sort of pinata to keep battering them with for the next 6 months or so until the election. They want to paint Labour as fiscally irresponsible. That's why this is a big debate around rules. Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have painted themselves as sort of Mr. Rules, the party of, sticking with the OBR, unlike Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget, for instance. So they've made their choice. But of course, those rules change. You get more and more harder for a Labour opposition or government. That will make it a big decision for Keir Starmer whether to stick with those rules or to whether go, actually, this is just a Tory divide and rule tactic, and I'm going to abandon them.
But how much do you think, really, this cuts through to voters? Because essentially what people will be thinking at home, despite these articles and what the Conservatives are trying to frame Labour as, people at home will be thinking, how much do I have left at the end of the month to enjoy life? And that will cut it, essentially.
Absolutely. Those really pertinent questions of how much am I going to pay for my bills this month? How much is my mortgage going to go up and down? What money do I have left to enjoy myself, if that's even a thing at the moment? When it comes down to it, I think it really cuts through the economics and cuts through Whitehall and cuts through, perhaps things that people see as London-centric and what is really going on in their communities and in their households. And like you said, after 13 years, people are really, really hungry for change. They don't necessarily want to vote Labour. They don't necessarily believe in Keir Starmer, but they want more money in their pockets at the end of the month. And they feel that to get that is to vote in a different government.
Yeah, well, the PM thinks he has the answer, and that's more tax cuts, James.
Yes, well, of course, we've just been debating about, government spending, fiscal rules, and we've talked about the stick, and now it's the carrot, which is tax cuts. And of course, less government spending means more tax cuts, and that's what Rishi Sunak's really kind of staking the house on. There was a big debate within government about whether they should cut inheritance tax. That now may be one that's rearing its head again ahead of March, and that budget is going to happen there. And really, I think this is what the Conservatives' main strategy is going to be: is paint themselves as fiscally responsible while also hoping to put forward a lot of tax cuts. Now, a cynic, of course, would point out that taxes did rise under Rishi Sunak as the Chancellor under Boris Johnson. But the hope is that I think that if he gets that feel-good factor back in the economy, people will start to feel, as you were saying, a sense of that their bills are going down and perhaps they're getting a bit more money in their pocket. It's a big challenge, but I think it's the best tactic he's got.
Do people have short memories, Afua? Will this be enough?
No, I honestly don't think it will. I mean, yeah, you're going to have the average worker saving £450 a year, maybe a bit better off, but I think people have really looked at what's happened over the past 13 years. And it's not just about, how much money do we have in our pockets. We're going to talk about the NHS and cancer patients in a minute and appointment times, but it's also about standards in public life. Are you acting like a Prime Minister? We went through the biggest crisis we've probably ever faced in the COVID pandemic. We had the worst government at the time to do that, and we're still feeling the effects of that. It's going to be 4 years, as we move into 2024, and people aren't seeing things getting better. And I think, the knock-on effect actually from what we went through in 2020, people are still feeling that now, and they're desperate for something better.
Yeah, and the effects here on the NHS. This is an article in the Sunday Times talking about cancer patients, and those all-important appointments have been delayed, not once, not twice, in some cases 3 times.
Absolutely. So this is people who are starting on their cancer pathway, as it were. So you've been referred by your GP for an urgent appointment, and the NHS initially had a target of 93% of patients being seen within the first 2 weeks to get them on that cancer pathway. That was dropped to 75%, and now you have patients saying that they've had that first vital appointment where they start on that journey towards treatment and potentially feeling better, cancelled not once, not twice, but 3 times, and in some cases 4 times. And as next week, as we're going to have a junior doctor strike, you're going to have even more people having those appointments cancelled. This is a time of year when everybody's picking up those bugs and those illnesses, so you're going to have more people accessing the NHS when you've got less people actually working within the service, and then you're going to have waiting lists going up, and people potentially dying because they're not being seen on time. And these are the core issues that people up and down the country are really concerned about. Look, if I'm ill, am I going to be treated? If I'm told I have a serious illness, is something going to be done? And think about how stressful that must be, to be referred that you potentially could have a life-threatening illness and to have an appointment cancelled again and again and again.
Yeah, it's a staggering figure here. They're saying more than 1.2 million appointments cancelled.
Yeah, I mean,
across the board.
We've got 6.4 million people waiting for 7.7 million appointments. Last year, I think more than 10% of days when the NHS were affected by industrial action. This means, of course, on Wednesday when we have this big walkout, it's going to be, I think, the longest strike we've had in a long time in the NHS and junior doctors. And of course, incidentally, it's a year to the day that Rishi Sunak promised as one of his 5 pledges to bring down the NHS waiting list. So I think obviously it's a suboptimal time for the government. And I was talking to one person in Rishi Sunak's team, and they said, "Are you going to be marking the anniversary?" He said, "Probably not, because of course, it's going to add to the backlog by having more and more waiting times, etc., with doctors not being sorted them out." So I think it could be an issue in the election. Probably not the dominant one, well, the economy, but I think public services will win the top 2 or 3 come May or October.
Yeah, okay, let's move on then. This is the front page of the Daily Mail. Attack, would you say, on people working from home?
Well, yeah, this is the Mail's long-standing war on Whitehall. They're really not fans of working from home. And this is some new research out showing that the number of civil servants who are working on sort of full-time home working contracts has doubled in a year. And basically their concern is, and reflecting the concern of Tory MPs, is that actually civil servants aren't doing the work they're supposed to be doing. And I think the more interesting, perhaps, element of this story is that the number of staff at public bodies who are sort of working from abroad has risen to nearly 10,000 days since 2020. And I think
that's the dream, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I think there was a big story a few years ago in the pandemic, the Information Commissioner working from Canada, and with obvious effects for workflow efficiency. So I think that would be one that could sort of, we want to sort of develop in the kind of months and years ahead in terms of what's the culture in Whitehall. I will say, in defence of the civil service, there aren't enough spaces in the Whitehall estates because we've sold off a lot of buildings and there's not enough room for them all.
Hot desking,
hot desking. So it's a big debate, and actually the Tories have changed their mind a lot on this, because some of it was like, we're going to level up, we're going to take offices out of Whitehall. On the other hand, we want everyone in the desks. We also want remote working, we want to cut efficiencies, etc. So I still think that a lot of people have a lot of different instincts and conflicts when it comes to the civil service.
Definitely. Afua, work from home or get people back in the office? What's your take?
There's a lot of people who really see the benefits from working from home because they can be there to do school runs and things like that. But also there's lots of, I think, younger members of staff that really benefit from being in offices and learning from experienced members of staff, those water cooler
Those
moments.
meetings that you get when you're walking down a corridor and you're able to say, hey, I've got this idea. Those magic moments are lost, I suppose.
Absolutely, and I think people really benefit from those as well. I think hybrid working is a way forward, having a bit of both and a good mix.
We'll end on the Daily Star then. Their front page. I always love a Daily Star front page. Happy Booze Year. So look, later tonight, lots of people are going to enjoy themselves, aren't they? Great front page.
It is a great front page, and actually, this is touted to be the best New Year's since 2019, not weather-wise, obviously, as you can see outside, but in terms of sales, in terms of pubs, best New Year since 2019, 40,000 pubs are saying that trade is up 10% since last year. Trade was up 12% over Christmas Eve. There's going to be 20 million pints sold tonight, apparently. Sales of party food are up as well. Aldi have sold 14 million tempura prawns and 100 cheese bites every minute.
I love a cheese bite.
Can
James, how will you be celebrating?
Well, I'll be doing my bit for those, 40 million pints?
There you go. Well done.
And just with some friends, I think. And also, champagne bottles being sold every second.
Yeah,
so,
I've got a few of those in my hand.
I bet. Lots of popping corks.
Prosecco for me all the way. James Afua, for now, thank you so much.